Hello, my name is Elaine from Nest Book Festival. This month, as part of the Nest Book Fest read-along, we are reading Ursula Buchan's Beyond the 39 Steps, A Life of John Buchan. This fantastic book is a biography of her grandfather, John Buchan, and it's written from the unique perspective of a direct descendant. I had the great pleasure and privilege of speaking to Ursula Buchan about her book today, so I hope you enjoy it.
Ursula, I would just like to ask, what does this book, which is a great piece of work, which encompasses so much of John Buchan's work, what does it mean to you?
Well, I wrote it because I was worried that as the years passed, he would get lost to sight. He would just be the man who wrote the book on which Hitchcock's famous film was based. And that seemed to me a great pity, because it wasn't just that he wrote 100 books and 1,000 newspaper articles and all the poetry and the short stories, but also that he was a very active public figure and on a big stage, not just in this country, but also in Canada after he'd been made Governor General just in 1935. And so there was lots to say about him. He was a major figure in his lifetime, and I didn't want him to get lost to sight.
To what extent, the fact that he lived such a great and full public and private life, to what extent do you think that has influenced his written work? It's very much at odds with some people's assumption of a writer closeted away at home in their garret, suffering from their further art. To what extent do you think his full life has contributed to his written work?
They were completely integral. He never wanted to be in an ivory tower. I mean, he had a house in the country after the First World War, and he could write very well there. But he always wanted to be engaged in public things, and that was because of his upbringing. Son of a Free Kirk minister, brought up in that very outward-looking Scottish provincial environment, knowing he was going to have to make his way in the world. And so he had such good concentration that he could write his novels with his children playing around him. It didn't worry him. He had a fantastic capacity for just settling down and doing what he needed to do.
So do you think reading all about his working life has influenced your working life and how you go about your writing?
Without a doubt, yeah. He's a great inspiration to me, and I don't say that about many people, but I recognise the importance of seizing the time, not wasting my time, focusing on something, not getting distracted all the time. I think we're all very distracted these days, and he had the capacity just to concentrate on one thing at a time and then move from one thing to another. And so he never wasted time. And I think that really is hugely important.
One of my favourite lines in the introduction was when you talked about the crump of exploding myth. Can you tell me what surprised you most about him during the research of the book?
Well, I think there were a number of things that I really hadn't realised until I properly got into the research, looking at the letters and the archives and papers. And one was I'd always, for some reason, rather imagined that, his family must have been sacrificed for all this public effort and duty. And looking through the papers, I discovered actually that he was a very affectionate and very engaged father, and also devoted husband. And so somehow, despite everything he did, he managed to stay connected with his children. He wasn't always about. When he was in the House of Commons, he would live in London during the week. But generally speaking, he was really engaged with what they were doing and very affectionate about them. And quite funny sometimes about them too. And the other thing is that I'd always rather imagined that his marriage, as a middle-class provincial Scot, his marriage to a aristocratic Anglican Englishwoman, that must have been because he felt it would help open doors, in Edwardian England. I discovered actually from the love letters that they completely adored each other, and in fact they were very touching, the letters, and so that's a myth as well. So I was rather glad to be able to explode those particular two.
It was a society wedding. It wasn't a society marriage. It really was a real marriage. To what extent do you think Susie and his family enabled him to write the incredible works that he did and live the incredible public life that he did?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Susie hasn't appeared much, his wife hasn't appeared much in earlier biographies, but because I remembered her, I knew her. She didn't die till I was in my early 20s. She had a very long widowhood. I knew how important she was in protecting him. You know, she felt her job was to make his life as easy as possible. He was the breadwinner. He was the one who earned every single penny, and her job was to see that he had an agreeable, comfortable, sociable life, but was allowed to get on with the things that he really needed to do. And they were a real team. They're a real partnership. She was extremely intelligent. Not very well educated, but extremely intelligent and very well read. So they had a great deal in common. I think actually he did her a lot of good. I think he widened her horizons. She became a suffragist as a result of him, in fact. He'd always been keen on women getting the vote. And she became an active campaigner, a law-abiding campaigner, but an active one nevertheless, as a result of being married to him.
Because she probably wouldn't have had the educational opportunities as a young woman at that time that he clearly had. Obviously, when he was at Oxford, it was mainly men, so she wouldn't have had that opportunity. So it's wonderful to hear that he could open her eyes and her mind in lots of ways that she wouldn't have had access to.
That's absolutely right. And when I got into Cambridge University, she wrote to me and said how glad, obviously congratulating me, but saying, you know, how she really wished she'd gone to university. But it was just not, you know, at the end of the 19th century, it really wasn't on.
Done.
But for most women, it really wasn't.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, and I'll look forward to putting this out on the social media, and I hope we do get to meet in person one day.
Yes, I hope so too. Thanks very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.